for the stuffed celery, it said to cut it into 6-inch pieces, and I cut it into 4 instead because 6 looked ridiculous. I think it's 4. And much closer to 4. 3.5, 4 inches. Anyway, it says to pile them log cabin fashion, and I started to do that, but all I have to say is that if you want a log cabin built, you probably do not want to call me for design ideas, because I think your log cabin designed by me would be unfortunate. You wouldn't be living in there. Hi friends, and welcome back. We are now on week 2 of the 52 Sunday Dinners project. If this is your first time here, hello, my name is Ashley, and I'm a registered dietitian with an affinity for all things vintage and food. That's led me to this. This is the 52 Sunday Dinners project. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about what we're doing here and what the point is, I gave a more in-depth explanation during week 1, and I'll go ahead and link that now if you'd like to go back and look to learn a little bit more about the whole purpose of what we're doing here. With that said, here is what we'll be making today. We're starting with clam broth and toasted crackers, and then for our main dish, we'll be having baked ham with carrots and peas. We're skipping over the mashed potatoes today because we've had those for about half of the meals, and I think we get the point. Then we'll have nut bread, a grapefruit salad with stuffed celery, caramel custard, fancy sweet crackers, and as always, we'll have coffee. Let's go ahead, get our aprons on, and get started in the kitchen. We are going to attempt to caramelize the sugar. If you have seen past episodes, you know that my candy making skills or sugar handling skills are on par with my baking skills. We're going to try to keep a closer eye on this. Hopefully, this turns into the appropriate color and texture of sugar that it's supposed to. We're all going to find out together how this goes. It's starting to turn into a syrup and caramelize here, I believe. Oh, it's looking wonderful. Look at how beautiful that is melting like that. I expected this to take way longer than this. Okay. Let's add this water. Woo! Shoot. Are we supposed to let this cool before we add the water? Let me double check this recipe over here. Rich caramel color, and no, it says to cook it with the water. Oh baby. He is a sitting. Oh guys, I have to turn this fan back on. This is concerning. Oh, but it smells amazing. The way this is foaming, I just have a feeling I have made candy and not syrup. I really, really hope that this is syrup and not candy, but the way it looks right now, I have a feeling I'm going to pour this out and it's going to be taffy or something. We may, normally I would say we just go with what we've got, but if it's not syrup, we'll start this one over. You see if it's candy instead of syrup. Yes. Yes, I think this is candy, and I think we need to do a redo. Here we go for our second attempt. I have cleaned all of the sugar, hard candy, whatever was a leftover in here out of this pan. And I really want this to work, and so I don't think we're going to follow the recipe completely. What I'm going to do is pretend that it was my first time doing that. I didn't know what I had done wrong, which I guess isn't so much a pretend as it is extremely accurate. But I will pretend that I went to my neighbor or mother, mother-in-law, grandmother and said, how do I do this? And they would say, oh, here's a little trick. Do this, 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 and this. And then I would have improved it. So let's pretend that's what happened. I just decided to look it up and Google it a little bit. And I have read several things, including do a little bit of lemon juice and to rub your surfaces with lemon juice. That'll keep it from crystallizing, and also adding more water than seems necessary because it's going to evaporate out. So to start it off with a little bit of water. So it feels like a very wrong thing to do to put lemon juice on my cast iron, but we can always reseason this. It's no big deal. And then we're going to add a little water ahead of time instead of waiting till the end, and then we'll add all of the water in the end too, and hopefully we will come out with a thick caramelized syrup. Well, it looks like the middle, I haven't touched it, and the middle appears to be crystallized already. This is really tricky, guys. Yeah, second attempt, cooked too long, didn't work. With this here, it didn't start thickening up until the eggs started cooking, and so I'm thinking we have some scrambled eggs in here. Maybe not. What would I temper the eggs with? Because if I'm supposed to add all this stuff into the double boiler, should I have tempered the eggs? And if so, should I have just heated the butter first and then added it slowly to temper the egg yolks in this particular recipe? When you guys make your boiled dressing, how do you handle it? And what could have been done differently here? What are your expert tricks to not getting scrambled eggs in something that the majority of the cooked part is eggs? I can't say that I would pair grapefruit and olives together or think to pair them together. However, the other week we paired grapefruit and chili powder together, which the recipe actually didn't call for. I just read the recipe wrong, and it was delicious. And so maybe this olive and grapefruit combination is going to be a very pleasant surprise. Not something in my Rolodex of flavor combinations that I would pick out, but heck, I guess we're gonna find out how it goes together. All of the dry ingredients are already mixed together in this bowl here, and I've cut everything in half. Now, we've made this nut bread once before that I recall. We may have made it more times than that, I don't remember. But normally, I have been not repeating a lot of these recipes, but several of you have pointed out that you'd like to see the improvements and the differences in making them a second or third time. And so we're gonna go ahead and do this nut bread again. And we're just going to cut it in half. And something I'd like to point out about this nut bread that several of you pointed out to me is that this bread is not a dough, it's a batter. And that the rising time probably actually wasn't a rising time. It was more of a rehydration time because the flour, the gram flour for this, is much coarser, thicker, denser. The ability for it to absorb the milk and the liquid and the eggs is going to be a little bit longer. So in fact, the rising time would be a rehydration time. Something different with this recipe that we're doing or using that it doesn't call for, and I don't know if this will end up hurting this recipe or helping it or none of the above. But the milk that we're using is actually buttermilk. I still have some leftover buttermilk from last week's recipes, and I'm not going to end up really using it for much, and so I've decided to put it in here and see, I guess, just kind of what happens with buttermilk. We're gonna find out what adding that to this nut bread does, if it gives it a different flavor or a different texture or a different rise. The instructions on this talk about scrubbing the ham. You're supposed to soak it overnight and scrub it really well. I think in today's modern hams, everything, all the scrubbing and whatnot has already probably been done. I don't think we really need to do that. I did soak it overnight and I am going to drain it and boil it. I'm assuming this is to get some of the salt out maybe. The ham that I did get, I went to a local butcher and requested a fresh ham, and I don't even know, I didn't know what I was talking about when I said fresh ham. I guess I was just thinking the hams that we buy frozen now they just seem a lot more processed than what I would think a ham would have been back then, but maybe not. For this, I'm going to skip the step of the scrubbing. I am going to drain the water that we soaked it in overnight. I don't know that I'm gonna remove the skin because, again, I think maybe the skin in today's hams are probably much different than the skins that maybe would have been in hams 100 years ago. So I think maybe all of that processing has already been done for us, but if I'm wrong, let me know, because I don't know a ton about how they used to process hams, but I'm really interested to know a little more. This calls for me to remove the skin and also to cover it in, or cover it in cloves. And I think I said before, I don't plan on removing the skin. And I also don't plan on covering this in cloves because I really am not a fan of cloves. I know that already, and I just don't want to waste all of this perfectly good meat when I won't want to eat the leftovers. Here we are, and we are ready to get started trying everything. And first things first is the clam broth. And we are back to having a starter with our meals. Several of the meals prior to this we have had kind of just starting right into the main course instead of maybe a little salad, a soup, a broth, a consomme, some type of a starter. So we're back with this one with a clam broth. Now, the clam broth, when I was reading the recipe, I read it that we were supposed to put the broth back into the oven to brown. When I read it again for the second time right before we started, it occurred to me that they probably meant to set the crackers in the oven to brown and not the broth. So I don't know if I have done something to this by setting it in the oven to brown. It looks good. It has a nice crusty brown crust on top. So we're going to go ahead, give this a try, and hope that by putting it in the oven, we haven't done something terrible. It smells very creamy. It smells a lot like milk and butter. I don't have a strong smell of seafood, which I would expect, but I'm not very familiar with clams myself. I don't think I love them, but I'm not sure. I don't think I've eaten them very often. Yeah, I think I smell a little bit of the clams there, but not a lot. And as you know, we used canned clams. I had canned, just plain old clams. When we made the oyster stew before, I couldn't find any fresh oysters, and I also couldn't find any canned oysters that were not smoked, so we used smoked oysters, and as you all have explained to me, that probably kind of defeated the purpose and isn't what you're supposed to use. It kind of, I think, ruins what the clam broth, or yes, the oyster stew should have tasted like. So with this, we made sure to buy, I don't even know if they make smoked clams or not, but I made sure to buy just plain, regular, minced clams for this. So I'd say this is okay. There's not a lot of flavor in it, I think, or I guess I should say that the flavors don't seem to have really melded with this recipe. I can taste the milk and the butter right at the beginning as I'm sipping the broth, and I really don't get a flavor of clam or what I would expect clam to taste like. The only time I actually tasted the clam was when I bit into it right there. It's a little rubbery, kind of chewy, probably because it's canned. Maybe a fresh clam would be much different. But for me, the clam broth as a starter is just okay so far. When I have a broth or a soup, I expect the main ingredient, so clams for this, to really be tasted and experienced throughout the dish. And for this, it really was kind of, hey, here's some milk and some butter right at first, and oh, hey, here's a clam to chew on. So for me, this recipe is just okay, but let's get into the main meal and see what we think of the rest of it. Those of you with a keen eye may have noticed that at the beginning, when I showed the menu for today, that at no point was the fried cauliflower that I showed being made on that menu. Well, I'll go ahead and show you a picture of the whole page of this menu and explain, I suppose, that something they did in this cookbook a lot is put recipes that do not belong in that day's menu on the page, or it will refer to another page to find the recipe for something. And several of you have pointed out that that was likely due to not having enough space, trying to save type pages space in this cookbook. And so I knew ahead of time that I didn't need to make this fried cauliflower. However, as I was getting everything ready for today, I saw the fried cauliflower, somehow panicked that I forgot that I was supposed to make it, did not refer back to the menu, and so here we are with fried cauliflower on today's menu, which is perfectly fine with me because I love cauliflower, and so we're just gonna put it in the menu. I'm really curious about ham. So our main course today is this ham, and if any of you remember having ham way back in the day, during your childhoods, was it different than it is now? Or some of you may have farms and might butcher your own pigs and might make your own hams. Does this recipe make more sense to those of you who remember those, I guess, earlier hams, or those of you who butcher your own hams? I guess I'm just not sure about the scrubbing it and the removing the skin and all of that, unless they're looking, I mean, I could have removed the skin and it would have taken away a lot of the fat, but it would have been a lot more dry inside. And I just don't know that, especially after boiling it and boiling most of the fat out anyway, that I would assume baking it would have made it very dry. I've never had a ham with a cracker crust before, so I thought that was pretty interesting. So let's give it a try and see what we think about it. I'd like to try first. I got a piece where there was no skin, so the cut side with cracker crumbs to see that texture. It smells very good. It smells very hammy. Almost like a very salty smoked scent. And I suppose you can't really smell saltiness. I think I just associate the smell with it being salty, but it smells very good. Yeah, you know, the flavor of this is delicious. The flavor, even mostly the texture is very good. However, it is very dry compared to most hams that I've had before. And as I just said a minute ago, I think that if we would have removed the skin completely, it would have been very dry. And so having thought that already, I now feel very strongly that if we would have removed the skin, it would have been extra dry. And I assume some of maybe that dryness is coming from the fact that we boiled the heck out of it before this. I think this is a 12-pound ham. And so a 25 minutes for every pound, you can extrapolate how long we boiled the heck out of this thing and removed a whole lot of the fat out of it. Let's try this with the peas and carrots. I already know that I love peas and carrots, but we'll give it a little try here with this ham. Maybe I'll lube it up a little bit. It has a tiny bit of moisture, but not a ton. I'm very surprised that there was no mention of making a gravy, and after boiling that ham, there really wasn't a lot of fat left after baking it. So for as dry as the ham is, and if we would have had mashed potatoes also, it's just very surprising to me that we wouldn't have had something to moisten both of those up with. The peas and carrots are fantastic. I love peas and carrots. They're a great combination with another classic ham, peas and carrots, mashed potatoes. It seems like it all goes together very well. Now let's try the thing that doesn't go with this menu. Let's just see. We've made the cauliflower. Let's see how it tastes. It smells just like I think we said last week. It smells very cruciferous. That's delicious. This batter is wonderful. That addition of the egg white really fluffed it up. And see if you can see that. I don't know what the camera is focusing on here, but yeah, that is wonderful. It reminds me, Nani makes a delicious dish, and it's just fried zucchini flowers. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. Others of you may be like, what are zucchini flowers? And if you've ever grown zucchini, you know there's little blossoms that grow off of the zucchini. Instead of letting those die off, if you just pick them and bring them inside, you can stuff them with things. You can just eat them as they are on salads, on pizzas, on whatever. You can also roll them in a batter or dip them in a batter and fry them, and they are delicious. And with Nani's batter, she adds club soda, I believe, to it to fluff it up, and make it a lot more light and airy. And that's what this reminds me of a lot. This is fantastic. Now for our salad course, we have two options here. One being the stuffed celery, the other being the grapefruit salad. Now, I was excited to make the stuffed celery because I remember every Thanksgiving when we would go to my Aunt Lorna's house, this would be the recipe or the appetizer that we would have. And sometimes as kids, we were even allowed to help make them. So she would give us the pieces of celery and we would fill them with the cream cheese mixture and put it out for all of the guests to have. And it made us feel like we were really contributing and helping with the meal. And I know that I love these, so I'm gonna go ahead and I guess crack into a little nostalgia here, or crunch into a little nostalgia, should I say. It smells like Thanksgiving. It's delicious. The combination of crunchy, juicy, almost salty celery with the creamy cream cheese mixture is just delightful. When I hear boiled dressing, I guess assume that it's very much like mayonnaise. And maybe this is going to be very much like mayonnaise. It looks like mayonnaise. The texture is similar. However, when I transferred the mixture into the container and when I opened up that jar again and went to put it on this plate, it smells so strong of vinegar, which is something that I know I really like, but I think it's going to be much different than normal mayonnaise, and we all know how I feel about that. So I'm so interested to see how all these flavors are going to come together. Let's find out. The smell combination is not something that I would put together on purpose. I like the smell. I guess I love the smell of vinegar. I love the flavor of grapefruit, and I like the smell of olives, but mixed together like this, I'm not sure that I'm really digging this smell altogether, but let's see how the flavors get together. I'm going to try it first, I think, without the boiled dressing. Then I think I'll try the boiled dressing on its own to see what I think of that, and then we'll try them together. Okay. It's so strange. You know what? I'm not going to take back that this is weird. For me, at least, it's still weird. The flavor combination doesn't make sense, but it kind of makes sense. There's almost like a, how do I describe this? Like there's two separate flavors. And I think in a previous video I was trying to describe the way these flavors were coming together, and it was almost like they were forming their own new flavor, and that's not what this is. This almost feels like a gradient of flavors. So right at the front, I taste the grapefruit, and it's strong grapefruit, and that's all I taste. But then I start tasting the grapefruit and the olives, and then at the end, just the olive comes out in flavor. And I don't know how else to describe that, but that's what I'm experiencing with this. It's like this, this thing of flavor, or maybe this thing of flavor. I don't know, but it really works together. All right, let's try just the boiled dressing and see what we think of that compared to mayonnaise. Ooh, yeah, it smells like vinegar. Whew, that's just a punch right up the nose. Ooh, I like it, but it definitely tastes like I'm just taking a straight shot of vinegar. Oh, I'm really starting to salivate. Did I read these ratios correctly? Is Oh, I was supposed to thin this out with cream. I wonder how much whipped cream or whipping cream I was supposed to thin this with. Maybe that would have diluted it a little bit. Hold on, let me do that because this is great. I love it, but I don't think that's what it's supposed to taste like. So hold on. It says plain or whipped cream to mix this with to dilute for taste, I suppose. And I wasn't sure if they meant liquid whipping cream or actual cream that has been whipped cream. So I got a little bit of both. This one is the whipping cream and this one is the whipped cream. I'm sure you can see the difference. So let's taste each of those and see what we think. Okay, so with the whipping cream, definitely still a giant kick in there, but not as much, and it just brings the acidity down quite a bit. Adding that fat in there, I think, really helps bind it up. And I assume very similar with the cream that has been whipped. It still smells like straight up vinegar. Now it might be the amounts put in, I don't know, but the whipped cream seems like it almost binds that acidity a little bit better. That like eye closing feeling of that acid was still very much there with the whipping cream, lessened much more with the whipped cream. And I assume that it's going to suit this salad like just much better with the whipped cream. So we'll try it with that. Again, just really seems like really strange combinations. All right, here's to this. that punch or that kick comes back. These flavors, the olive and the grapefruit, seem to bring out the acid of that boiled dressing more, at least to me. And that almost gradient effect of flavors is removed with the addition of this dressing. So it's all very interesting. I'm finding it really neat also in trying all these different things and paying closer attention to what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing when I'm trying this. All the different nuances, I guess, of some of these flavors that maybe I wouldn't have noticed before. Maybe when I ate this salad before, I would have just kind of, gone in, eaten it, been like, oh yeah, this is okay, and then moved on. I don't know that I would have stopped and really paid attention to and listened to my brain and what was occurring with a lot of these flavors. So that has been really, really neat, a really cool unintended effect for me of this project. Oh shoot, I forgot about the nut bread. We've made this once before. This time I halved the recipe and I made it with buttermilk instead of regular milk. So let's see what the difference is there. It's way lighter than the last one with this buttermilk, at least that I'm recalling. I didn't go back and look at the film from the last nut bread, so I don't remember what the last one looked like or tasted like. I have a vague recollection that it was a little bit darker and that I think I liked the texture. Other than that, I honestly don't remember. But here is this. You can see it's definitely very light. It seems to be pretty dense. Let's give it a... It smells like walnut. That's very good. This, I don't know if the buttermilk makes a giant, it seems like this buttermilk does make a giant difference. This tastes, the density and moisture are very high, and it's very sweet. Now, I know there was, a lot of sugar and everything in this, but this, instead of it being part of the meal, this really could be the dessert. This is delicious, and we could stop here and have this as a dessert. However, I am so looking forward to trying this custard, so we definitely are not stopping here. Let's go try that custard. I was so excited, and I wanted so badly for this one to turn out. I love caramel. I love custard. A caramel custard, what could be better? As I mentioned before, my skills at cooking sugar are not really very good. And that's probably evidenced in the fact that I had to do 3 attempts at the syrup to make it work. I wanted this to turn out so bad, and so after the first 2 rounds of making hard candy, I turned to the internet and to YouTube to find out how to make this syrup. And I know some of you are saying, well, yeah, you should be looking some of these things up, looking at the history, that sort of thing. But I think a little bit of, or a lot of the point of what I wanted to do or accomplish in this is to look at these recipes, cook it with my own interpretation. And when I'm doing that and when I'm talking to you, I'm picturing you being right there with me, as Nani would be in the kitchen with me, or as any other person with experience cooking would be in the kitchen with me, and talking to you in it's real time for me, not for you watching it, but you giving me feedback in the comments as if you're in there with me. I want this to be almost the way, and it's not in real time, it's not the same thing because you're not sitting here with me and correcting me as I'm doing it, but 100 years ago, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to look something up or check a video on YouTube to see how they would have done something. They would have had to talk to somebody and learn from the feedback and from the experience. And that's kind of how I want this to turn out, at least for myself. I know those of you who are looking through that, maybe you don't know how to cook as well and you're on my level of experience, you're looking through the comments and learning, maybe not in real time of what you would have done, but maybe you're the third person in the kitchen and you're observing the conversation between me and the experienced person who's teaching me, and you're learning through that observation. So I know it doesn't make sense, but in my head it's making sense. I'm picturing all of our timelines kind of merging together, and I guess it's imaginary, but I'm imagining you teaching me in the kitchen as I'm doing it. And so, having said all that, I broke the rule and I watched a video on YouTube. I watched several of them, and I decided to go with this one. I will link it down in the description. I don't know if I'll be able to link it up here or not, but if not, look down in the description to find the video. And I used a method that did everything wrong, or everything I've ever heard or been told is the wrong thing to do. And so I decided to do it anyway because all the right things to do have not been working for me. For even before this project, I've tried to work with sugar and candy before, and I really don't do a good job. And so I decided, well, what the heck do I have to lose? So I tried her method, which involves stirring it the whole time, stirring the sugar the entire time, which is what I have been told don't ever do. Don't touch the sugar, don't agitate it, let it be, just let it boil right there. And we went with the opposite method this time, and it worked. Third time was a charm. So if you saw the syrup in there, and here is our caramel custard. It is so gorgeous, and I might not have cooked it quite long enough. It probably could stand to be thicker, and I don't know if that's on the recipe here or if it's on me for not cooking it long enough, but goodness, I was sitting there stirring and stirring and stirring that custard for an hour, maybe. I think it was at least an hour. I mean, maybe it was 5 minutes and it felt like an hour, but I'm pretty sure looking at the clock that it was close to an hour that I was cooking this, and I thought, I am never going to make it to dinner. As it is now, it's currently 9 o'clock as we're eating this, because this took so much longer than I expected. And so I finally gave up and said, okay, we're going to eat it at the texture it's at. And so it's a little thinner than I think a normal custard should be. I just want to make sure you all can see that. See the texture here. It's still, I mean, it's pretty thick. It's not a liquid. Oh, it smells wonderful. And I have to tell you the truth. I tasted this already warm because I did the spoon trick that several of you told me to do, to dip a cold spoon in there. And if it coats the back of the spoon, then it might be ready. And I think you were telling me that about maybe sugar, but I tried it on this too. And then I cooled it in the fridge a little bit for the texture. And I didn't try it cold with the texture, but I did when it was still warm on the back of the spoon. I couldn't waste it. That would just be, that would be wasteful. So I didn't do that. So I have tried it hot already. And the hot custard is, it is so good. So I can't imagine how it's going to be cold. It smells delicious. Let's go ahead and try this. The color is more like a butterscotch pudding or like a light pumpkin pie filling, which is kind of perfect for this adorable little pumpkin ramekin. And I think I might have showed you the top of it too. Isn't it the cutest thing? I got these for Christmas. Our parents found, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think they found 6 of these for me. And so I'm just so stoked to add them to my collection and decided to use them pretty immediately upon receiving them. So let's give this a try. Yeah, this is delicious. I'll say that the texture is perfectly fine. I've had other custards that the texture is much better. This isn't as thick and creamy. It's a little thinner and almost a little bit grainy, maybe. I mentioned it. It looks like pumpkin pie filling, the color a little, and even the texture looks a little bit like a pumpkin pie filling. I don't know if you can see in there. You can just see kind of the separation of the grain a little bit in there. And I don't know if grain is the right word or not, but it's not a thick, smooth like you think of when you have creme brulee or something like that. But the flavor is still amazing. And the texture is just, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not unpleasant. It's just not that thick, creamy custard texture that you, I guess, have come to get used to and expect. And again, it could be this recipe. It could be the way that I made it. I'm not sure because I don't have enough experience making my own custard that has turned out well enough to know if I did something wrong or if the recipe was wrong. But again, if you know, chime in with what you know there. What did I think of this menu overall? I think this menu was a winner. I think everything really went together very well. The clam broth to me maybe wasn't something that I would choose to have with ham, but maybe that's just me. Maybe clam broth goes really well with ham and I'm just not used to that. But everything else really seemed to complement each other very, very well. Overall, great menu. As far as cost for this meal, overwhelmingly, the ham was definitely the most expensive part. I think buying that ham from a butcher was between $40 and $50. And overall, I think that the meal probably cost somewhere near $75 for this. I didn't include the cauliflower in that because the cauliflower is not supposed to be part of this meal, but I did consider the probably $1.50 that the mashed potatoes would have cost, or I guess for 6 people, probably maybe around $5 that the mashed potatoes would have cost. Nutrition-wise, this meal was kind of a win. You start off with your clam broth. You have a little bit of protein in that. Your ham, very rich in protein. And then we move on. We have some starchy and non-starchy vegetables. Our salad course with the celery, and we have grapefruit there. And even our nut bread We had that gram flour, which is much higher in fiber and retains a lot more nutrients than what a white flour for a nut bread would have been. And so overall, I think this menu was a pretty decent win for nutrition. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please join us next week where we take some of the things that we've been learning from you, including a pie crust from Cindy, and we'll use that to make our cherry pie, and we have another fruit salad with gelatin. See you next week for that. It's New Year's Eve here, and it's finally snowing. I did not expect the snow to be here today. It was warm and cloudy this morning, and I guess by warm I mean it was above freezing. It was in the maybe 38 or something. And so because it was warm, we decided to let these guys out to stretch their little wings, and now they're just kind of playing in the snow and enjoying this time. Here, who wants some leftovers? You guys want the ham bone? Hi. Hi. Try it. Come on, you silly goose. Nobody? No interest. You crazy little duck. You guys afraid of the ham bone? What about this? Will you eat your food out of here?